There's no buds in that one. Well, there are. They just popped off, and I don't know where they are. Do you want to take my my fancy ones?
No, I can get these.
Really? They suck.
I don't care.
Okay.
I just want to eat until before I go into
Okay. Let's see. Sound checking and all that stuff. Let's see how it went. Oh boy. So I see there's some Australian posted on the thing already. Looks good. All right, folks. I know some of you are probably already on. Actually, I can see how many of you are on. I always forget that. Oh, there's two, and one of them's me. So one person's on. Mike is here. He's just taking a quick PP, and I'm just going through the normal old checks here. So looks like we're up and running. I see Daniel and Eagle Syndrome have already posted some questions and comments. Awesome, awesome. Okay, looking pretty good. What is all this crap on my screen? Jesus. Okay. Yeah, looking good. I got questions pulled up. Everything's good. Sounds good. I got a couple drinks. Had some Cheez-Its. All's good. So now I'll just wait for Dr. Mike. And we have a relatively short list of questions tonight. So hopefully we'll get out at a reasonable time. Saw a couple new names, a lot of familiar names, and actually quite a spicy name. I think you all know who it is when it comes up.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there's Mike. Let
me get my headphones on.
Get my headphones on. Not as popular as Right on Ridge.
Yeah, James, we're not going to sing that song. That will put us in irreparable disrepute.
Did you remember that Dave Chappelle one where there was a rapper and his song was like "Turn My Headphones Up" or something like that?
Absolutely. He was deaf.
Yeah. Turn them shits up. No, really, I can't hear. Turn my headphones up.
Yeah, it was just a mixtape. That's his entire career was in one mixtape.
That was, oh my God. I loved that show.
Yeah, Chappelle's show was very, very good.
I like your buff Stay Puft Marshmallow Man shirt.
Yeah, Marcos. It's a Marcos shirt.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. All right. All right. Yes. I feel like I'm getting into my World of Warcraft chair.
Oh my God. Dude, I have a new client. So awesome. This person like sends me video check-ins and they're really good. I was a little kind of like a little apprehensive at first because this person would send me a video, but the videos are always awesome and really, really funny client. And this last update, they were like, "Oh, my friend's in town. We had a really busy weekend watching anime, playing video games." I was like, "That's how my weekends are. It's so awesome." And it sends me like really good feedback and info every time. But I thought it was funny because they were like, "Oh, we had this like crazy weekend and it involved like, games and stuff and anime." I was like, I can relate. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, man. That sounds like right up the alley.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hold on. I just want to make sure I see all the questions. Seven pages? Is that accurate?
Sounds like it. Yeah, one of them's like not really even a full page.
Cool. All right.
Ready to rock?
Yeah.
Dude. You see right at the top?
Yeah. That is good. Very good.
Love it. So good.
So let's get into it. Ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Giovanni Fraguella
So Spice, can't even stand it.
says, "Sup, guys? Man, that's not how you're supposed to talk. God
Yeah,
damn.
come on.
He says, oh,
There we go.
which translates to "Sup, guys." So I've been running Meso 1 from the men's physique template for almost 6 months now. I'm still making a lot of great progress. Do you think I should run Meso 2 and 3 now, or just keep running Meso 1 until progress stalls? Man, I really can't fault you for running Meso 1. The only problem I foresee is that running that much sort of heavy real world stuff can eventually get you some nagging injuries. And we kind of want to do a low volume phase before that. So I think the 6 months is probably a top end. I would transition to Meso 2 and then 3. We'll really take a deep breath out after 3 and then restart another couple of months of Meso 1. James?
Yeah, so that's a good suggestion from Mike. One of the things, so there's kind of like a perspective that you can almost take two different angles on, right? So what most people would suggest, I think, is that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think largely we agree with that. If you're making progress, things are good. You don't always have to change it. But on the other hand, part of a good periodized program is adding some elements of variation, whether it's volume intensity or exercise selection, adding some variation so that you can keep making progress before it starts to stall out, right? And so you might benefit for a variety of reasons, right, from doing some lighter, like metabolite style work. If you've been going heavy for a long time and getting a lot of wear and tear, you'd certainly benefit from having some easier training every now and again. So there's good reasons kind of to look at that same idea from both perspectives. And you say, yeah, if things are going good, do you have to change it? No. But yeah, 6 months, I would say you probably do up for a little bit of change. I would do what Mike suggested and go Meso 2, Meso 3, and then you can do another real long stretch of Meso 1 if it's been really productive for you after that.
Yep, and we actually just updated the male physique template. So if you up it this way, if you're due for another male physique template body part split, get the new ones. I wouldn't get the new ones just unless you have like money to spare, because the old ones are perfectly fine. I would just get the new ones if you're going to get a new template anyway, or you're just really cheap to try something a little different. They're very, very similar, but one of the changes, there's a couple changes. But one of the changes is that Meso 1 has basically been doubled. There's a Meso 1 and Meso 2 and Meso 3 and Meso 4. 3 and 4 are the old 2 and 3. So 3 is a metabolite meso, 4 is a low volume meso.
Oh,
Meso's
no. That's going to screw me up with coaching so bad.
Yeah, it's a little more convenient, though, because now the Meso 1 and 2 are both traditional, like just heavy, high volume. And sometimes the Meso 2 has slightly higher volume. Sometimes we just let the intensity control the volume there. And so the updates are cool because, and also so the meso lengths have been extended. Each meso is a little longer now. It's a different, how much longer depending on your training age. But what ends up happening is you basically run kind of like Giovanni did, the equivalent of Meso 1 or Mesos 1 plus 2 for like more like 3 months now, as opposed to much less time, even a little more than 3 months if you combine them. And then you run for still just about a month. You run Meso 3 and then a metabolite meso, and then the low volume meso is still just a little less than a month. So it ends up being like a 5-month program in total, and the majority of that time is running the traditional good volume stuff. So it's very much similar to what Giovanni did. He did a little bit more extreme, but the good news is most people will be switching to that kind of training.
I can barely keep the mesos straight with the male and female physique templates as it is.
Now they're the same.
Oh, okay. They're the same across?
Yep. So male and female physique templates.
Better.
Mesos 1 and 2 are just traditional. Meso 3 and Meso 4 are respectively metabolite and high volume. So the good news is now they're really similar. Mm-hmm.
But then we're going to have users using both the old and the new. So that's what I was saying for coaching, where people are going to be like,
totally.
F this. Yep. I'm going to be like, oh, fuck.
The good news is it's really easy to detect which ones are which. I could tell you later. I can tell you now. But
okay. No, it's fine. I'll do it later. But
yeah.
That's cool, though.
Yeah. They're one of the just to trump them up. By the way, they're on sale this week, and again, not that you should buy them just cause, but they're on sale just for those of you who would buy something new anyway. One of the other cool differences is the starting volumes are way lower on Mesos 1 and 2 because we found that minimum effective volume was much lower than we previously thought when we designed the first Mesos. So it really lets you crawl from minimum effective volume all the way up to MRV in each meso. And the cool thing is that some people, so we got some feedback on the first mesos, first male physique templates and female physique, and most people really liked them. All the feedback was great. But some people were like, man, and James, we actually had some feedback here on RP Plus where people are saying, like, by the time I'm really plus oneing everything, by the time I'm within my MEV, MRV window, it's only like 2 or 3 weeks left.
Yeah.
Because some people have really high MEVs and really high MRVs, specifically the latter. So in these updates, the rating system has been changed from 1, 0, -1 to 2, 1, 0, -1, -2.
Solid.
So like if you start at the low weeks and you're like, fuck, I don't feel anything, you can +2 them shits, and holy fuck, it gets you into high volume fast. On the other hand, if you start out, or even just you get yourself into a situation halfway through the meso, because they're longer mesos, where you're like, holy shit, I'm way over in over my head. If you -2 some shit, it really, really drops the volume. So it basically allows the program to be more flexible, which is going to make make it more effective for a wider range of people.
Awesome. So if you're somebody who's already doing that, modifying the template to that tune already, maybe not. But for anyone else who's getting a new template, that's probably going to be a really, really nice feature.
Yeah. All right. Next up is the one true orcish prince turned king who would turn the tide of Middle Earth. You know him. James knows him. I know him as Ido Dagul. And it never ceases to entertain me.
I know. It's just such a badass name. I love it.
Can you imagine Ido showing up for like an audition as an orc, and they're like, all right, like you're pretty jacked, but can you do the voice? He's like, ask me what my name is. They're like, what's your name? He's like, Ido Dagul. They're like, all right, put on the mask.
Exactly.
Or Ido is like, he's living in the Will Smith Bright universe, and he's like trying to get a fucking soda at 7-Eleven, and they're like, ID, and he's like, here it is, like, Ido Dagul, you're a fucking orc. He's like, no, god damn it, I'm Jewish. Jesus Christ. Why does everyone think that? They're like, nope, you're a second-class citizen. He's like, fuck.
I was thinking of him like trying out as like a second for like a fantasy movie like Lord of the Rings or something, and they're like, all right, your name's Gronk, and he's like, that name sucks. They're like, oh yeah, what's your name? Ido Dagul. You know what, we're gonna change the script, you just keep that name.
Oh man, and then that'd be sweet because in the what's it called, the credits, it would be like Ido Dagul, King of the Orcs, as Ido
himself.
Dagul. You're like,
what? Wait, this guy at the bottom of the list.
This is typo. There's absolutely no way this works. He's the guy that Jason Statham kills in the first 5 minutes of the movie or some shit. Jason, okay, I got it. Hold on. Ready?
Oh no.
Lord of the Rings, the entire trilogy redone in 1 hour with Jason Statham.
Wait, who would he be?
Everyone? I don't know. Just like
as like Frodo?
No. Okay, fine. That's Frodo. He's like, "Oi, Samwise, you fucking cunt."
I was thinking, okay, he could easily do Aragorn, but put him in like one of the Hobbit roles, like Sam or something. That'd be even better.
Perfect. You know what, man? I'll tell you what. Frodo would get way further if he had Jason Statham as a buddy than Samwise.
Oh hell yeah, dude! Can you imagine the fucking Smeagol shows up and he just ices him like right on the spot?
Yep, with a fucking 9 milli. Amazing.
Oh, that was easy.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Ido Dagul says, greetings, docs. Turns out my wrist is okay. I just need to avoid supination on back and biceps. Wow,
all right,
good.
Easy fix.
Oh, but another curveball is being thrown my way. Not a dull moment over here. I walked into the gym today, and to my surprise, they replaced all of the machines. What? That sucks.
That blows.
Okay. Do they even mesocycle, bruh?
Apparently not.
Anyway, how do I avoid being torn a new asshole by the crippling DOMs that comes after new variations, especially when you can't MEV it because you're mid-meso? How would you auto-regulate this? Do I not increase volume for those variations or even reduce sets? My recommendation would be to drop the sets on each exercise by like 1 to 2, depending on how many you're doing. Basically like a 25% drop in per exercise volume, however many sets it turns out to be, and then go up from there. James?
I would say it might depend on how vastly different the movements end up being. So here's just an example. Let's just say you were doing like either one arm or two arm dumbbell rows. Like, okay. And let's just assume that they got rid of the dumbbells just to illustrate my point. If you just did like a typical machine, like a chest supported machine row, right, you might have to go down a little bit because it's still a challenging movement, right? And you get a little bit of variation in there. But if it's like a stupid hammer strength low row, you might even find yourself going up in sets because the movement is just an inherently easier movement. You know what I mean? So I think the way that I would auto-regulate that is by how the degree of severity between the different movements that you have to replace.
Yeah. Fuck, man, James, you answered this better than me. Let me go up your alley and answer this now with it. You actually answered it more correctly. So
Yeah.
you know what you should really do is just start your workouts like normal and do the new machines in place of the old ones and use the Mike Israetel, James Hoffman Ghetto MEV estimator. Are you getting a pump? The soreness is something for later, but are you getting a pump and are you noticing that the movement is very disruptive and difficult? Like if you start, let's say you were using like a rowing machine or like a limited range of motion, the pads were too big, the grips were like the handles were too thick, and you kind of like, you just had to do like 8 sets to get anything out of it. But they replaced it with like a hammer strength, like not a low row, but one of those hammer strength, what's it called? Chest supported rows.
The ISO chest row.
Yeah, the ISO chest row, where you get like a super baller peak contraction, a super crazy stretch. And like, so after the first 2 sets, you're like, oh my God. So if you're getting nuked after the first couple of sets, just cut it there, right? But if you're like not feeling shit, just keep going. And then you might even end up going to more sets than usual. So basically know what perceived level of disruption you need for that week. Like if it's a week 4, for example, and you need to like really put it in, do as many sets as it takes to really fuck yourself pretty good. Depending on how the machine is, it may take more sets or fewer sets. So I think that's the much better answer.
Totally.
Sweet. He says, I fear the big bad Doms of potential overreaching the follows. Thanks for the help as always. You bet.
Yeah, just be smart. Like if you switch something and you're like, okay, I'm not really feeling it, but so I need to add sets per Mike's recommendations. Just know, okay, like maybe I can't go up in sets in some of my ancillary movements towards the end just to prevent that overreaching effect. You know, just be smart. Like if you notice you did more, okay, you can't add more without taking something else away. Keep that in mind.
Yep. Thoughts on relative intensity and MRV? Is it accurate to say that as long as you're around the ballpark of your MRV in the last week before a deload and you hit 0 1 RIR in all sets, that would send you to or over your MRV just by sheer fatigue, relative intensity, and ballpark volume? Trying to hit the exact same set numbers is a goose chase. And if one can repeat or increase performance despite hitting 0 1 RIR the week before, then he is meaningfully under his MRV. I think that's entirely correct. I think that if you're really hitting close to failure and you have accumulated a shitload of fatigue to where you're close to your MRV, the chances of you having anything like a productive week in the next week is basically 50-50 or less, which is really shitty. And because you could just deloading and going on is great, but the downsides of not having a productive week are really not that great. Injury risk is high. I think it really makes sense to just cut it. But if you hit 0 1 RIR and the next week you're like, fuck it, I'll do another one, you PR again and everything feels fine, you're definitely underdosing your volume. James?
Yeah, I think the only, like one of the few instances where you could have somebody who is truly getting close to their MRV and hitting that 0 to 1 RIR and then having a repeat performance in the next week really is going to be like your slow twitch dominant people. Then I'm talking majority slow twitch dominant people. They're the only ones who are going to find themselves in that conundrum every now and again. And that even then it won't be that often. For most people who are a mixed bag or even more fast twitch, it's almost certainly they're under. If they do a repeat performance, that means they were underdosing the last time.
You know, James, that brings up a really good point that I'd like to discuss. There is, and this is something that's so kind of like extrapolatory on my part. I don't even want to put it in the upcoming hypertrophy book, which James and I have to discuss actually. But yes, it has begun. It has begun. The outline is going to be formalized by the end of the week and sent over to you, James. But
cool. Can't wait to see it.
Oh yeah. So the shitty outline of me just putting stuff on a page is already 8 pages long. So you can imagine what this book's going to be like. But so this is one of those things. So How difficult is it to detect MRV? The answer is easy. The more fast twitch you are, the stronger you are, the bigger you are, and the more distinctly you accumulate fatigue. So actually, as your career progresses, it's easier to detect MRV. If you are a relative beginner, can't push yourself super hard yet, and are more slow twitch, sometimes you don't really have a distinct MRV because you just keep putzing along
Bounce
in this
back.
huge range of volume. Like 30 sets a week, you did fine. 32 sets a week, you got a little stronger, but not much. 34 sets, you didn't get any stronger, but you didn't get any weaker. 36 sets, you didn't get any stronger, but you didn't get any weaker. 38 sets, same thing. Finally, maybe at 40 sets, you like have a little bit of a decline in performance, which you're not quite sure if it's your MRV. And then like you have a really good week at 42 sets and you actually hit PRs again. It's rare, but the more slow twitch you are, and especially the more new you are to training, and if you're using exercises and or training before you knew what training is, really can happen, which is actually why we recommend that you don't even go to your MRV when you're a beginner. Like you stop at 2/3 MRV, which really just is operationally defined as when shit starts to get really tough, just deload and go back and repeat and get stronger. And by the time you're strong enough and experienced enough, you'll hit very, very clear MRVs. But some people who've been training for a while are so slow twitch dominant, like former endurance runners. It's their MRVs are basically like when you've reached an exotic number of sets, you're unbelievably fatigued, your cumulative fatigue is high, and you're no longer experiencing clear increases in performance. Then you just deload and repeat because you can putz along and survive for way longer, but it just does you no good.
Yeah, and at that point, hypertrophy is not going to be your forte anyway. So,
consider something else.
well, all I'm saying is like if you are, this is going to maybe that came off more harsh than I meant to, but all I'm saying is like if you are trying to hit 40 sets of chest and 40 sets of back per week in the hopes of being the next fucking Lee Priest or whatever,
yeah.
It's just not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So like maybe
it's almost like if you can survive
find
that
a
many,
hobby.
you're probably not going to be the next lead priest.
Right, exactly. So all I'm saying is there might be something that's more productive and more fun for you, such as cross country skiing or marathon or cycling. What I'm just making shit up, but that's all.
Sure, 100%. All right, Tony Drotnell says, "Hey guys, I was watching the Joe Rogan podcast episode while rubbing CBD oil on myself and doing mushrooms. That would be pretty sweet.
I have a tangent after we're done with this one about that. Not CBD oil, but Joe Rogan podcast.
Okay, sweet. So he's watching Joe Rogan podcast episode with Chris Kresser and Joel Kahn debating saturated fat health, amongst other things, and was really pleased to hear such an in-depth debate with citations presented on a mainstream podcast. In passing, Dr. Kahn dude, the Khan scream in the new Star Trek
it was so good.
Riveting. It was blood boiling. I was like just so incredibly pleased with that scream.
The first time you don't see it coming either, because you know the classic Khan, but you're watching the movie and you're used to Kirk doing it, right? Not Spock, and so you're like this. You just don't see it coming, and then when it happens, you're like, oh, that was so good.
So as embarrassing as to admit, I didn't know the Khan scream was until I saw it in the new Star Trek. And then I saw the Khan scream on YouTube after that, and I was like,
so lame.
Wow, so lame. God.
He's wearing like some ridiculous outfit too.
Yeah, it was the quintessential Shatner. It was overacted to the point of like comedic absurdity.
Yes.
You were joking, right? We're gonna another take where you actually try to do the scream. He's like, no.
That's why for me it hits so hard because like for me the classic one was like so goofy where you're like, okay, but this is like an iconic thing. But then when they flipped the script and had Spock do it, and it was really good, it was like, whoa, they just reinvented like this iconic scene, and it made it so much better. Sorry, we're rambling, but
it was great. And I was like, because you knew everyone who heard that scream was like, girl,
yeah,
shit's going down.
Yeah, that like gave me goosebumps. I was like, oh, they did it. They
super
did it.
goosebumps.
I can't believe they did it.
Fuck, I'm gonna rewatch that. All right. With Chris Kresser and Joel Kahn debating saturated fat health, among other things, blah, blah, blah. In passing, Dr. Kahn mentioned that meat consumption upregulates mTOR IGF-1 pathway, which makes you jacked, by the way, which he presented as leading to premature aging. That's probably not untrue. I admit that I have never heard this property of mTOR before. It is an implication associated with AMPK downregulation or some other mechanism. Yes. So, for example, intracellularly, probably not in all cells, but in some, metformin is actually upregulating AMPK on the net balance because of the increase in insulin sensitivity. This probably does not cost you muscle gains before you motherfuckers freak out. But metformin is one of the only experimentally confirmed anti-aging drugs. It's legitimately an anti-aging drug, probably because it upregulates AMPK, and AMPK directly counteracts the fat actions of mTOR. I'll put this to you guys in a very simple way. At some level, at a very general level, James, that was an excellent burp. Becoming stronger, more muscular to a point. Stronger, more muscular, more sort of virile in the sense of fucking eating meat and, you know, spraying your face with blood actually increases both your longevity and decreases your morbidity, or rather increases your quality of life. Past some point, there begin to be trade-offs that gets really muscular, consume a lot of meat, really upregulate mTOR, really downregulate AMPK. It actually starts to continue to increase your quality of life, decreases your morbidity, but probably decreases your longevity. So there's this really good zone of you can be an endurance runner, you can be a power lifter, and all as well, and you live a long time, so on and so forth. But like if you get to 300 pounds as a power lifter and mTOR your life away, then you will live long, you know, a really baller life, but it won't be as long. But on the other hand, if you want to be an AMPK running monk who weighs 120 pounds and barely does any physical activity that's not a slow walk, you will live longer on average, but then you have to ask yourself if that's the quality of life you want. So that's that.
People always associate AMPK activity as like a negative thing, right? When the reality is it's like, hey, it's one of the reasons that you can have a big energy output. And it's one of the things that puts you in a more fatigue resistant state with your muscles, right? And so that's actually a very good thing.
Primary endurance adapter, actually.
Yeah, and so even just I mean, like if you don't want to like have a fucking stroke going up your stairs, like that kind of activity on the whole is very good. So you know, I think people kind of get too much into the absolute, like the 0 and 1, where it's like good 100%. And bad. It's really not. It's totally fine. And if it's something that potentially could increase your longevity, a lot of people would be interested in that.
Yep. And then so Tony says, additionally, with the side effect only reasonably expected in sedentary individuals, would it be likely that when paired with exercise, mTOR upregulation should yield a net boost to health and longevity? Well, you know, so anything you pair with exercise yields a net boost to health and longevity because of the exercise. But remember, exercise, there's a whole lot of AMPK, and it does some mTOR as well, depending on the kind it is, but it always does some combination of AMPK and mTOR. I'll put it to you this way. In sedentary individuals, everything's fucking bad unless it's exercise and becoming not sedentary.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, if you're sedentary and have a lot of weird AMPK upregulation, you're still probably fucked because there's something wrong with you. Exercise is good to a point that is very high, and I wouldn't sweat the mTOR AMPK stuff too much. Just kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Look, vegans and endurance runners and endurance running vegans are probably going to outlive the rest of us, which is great. But they're probably not going to be baller jack motherfuckers who flip over cars and yell at people in the street for no reason. So if you want to be some combination of that, you know where it stands, right? And neither one of them means this, you know, like vegans don't have to be totally weak, pathetic pieces of shit. They can be super fucking strong and muscular, but not quite as strong as muscular as people who are meat eating, you know, 200-pound animals. On the other hand, you know, vegans will outlive those people, but probably not by that much. So the trade-off is wherever you see fit. But what I don't like to see, James, maybe you can comment on this further, is people who present a mystical world with no trade-offs. So they'll say, you know, you can eat like tons of sausage and bacon and an all-meat diet and outlive everyone. It's like, no, it's fun to do that, but it's not. You're not going to outlive fucking shit. And then there's people who say, like, you can be a vegan and still be the most jacked person on the planet. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, both ways have their trade-offs. The middle path is a fine place to start. The rest is up to you.
You know, I'll tell you, Mike, those things sell well. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why we see that in such high prevalence, like magical pill type advertisements. But yeah, it's all, life is full of trade-offs, man. If you want to be like the biggest, most swole guy on the block, like, yeah, it's probably going to come at some like if you won't be able to shrug off walks on the beach with your girlfriend, you're going to get a lower back pump, and you might be out of commission the next day, right? Well, that's the price you pay for being jacked.
Yep.
Tons of trade-offs in life.
Yep. All right, James, you ready for the following intro?
Oh, hit me. I'm ready.
A crowd on a moon of a distant solar system.
Ooh, very
cheers.
sci-fi.
The emperor of that planetary system rolled his eyes as the newest captive from another 100 worlds failed to meet the challenge. That man lies dead after only 20 seconds with the battle with the champion, the reigning, defending, undefeated. And the crowd yells his name, Ansuman Radhakrishnan.
That was very Thor Ragnarok-y of you.
Right?
Very good.
But like if Thor showed up a month earlier before Ansuman decided to come back to Earth and get a data science degree, he would have fucking died by the sword, bro.
That was good.
You know what?
I always have to say his name and write it down. I'm always like,
yeah. You know what? Probably half the audience in Thor Ragnarok, when they were talking about how cool the Hulk versus Thor fight were, half of them were also given the following disqualifier or qualifier of, yeah, but remember what Ansuman did to the motherfuckers? Like, that was called the Golden Age.
If the real champ was here.
Exactly. You motherfuckers glad he left. And the thing is, he didn't even belong to the fucking the guy who owned that planet. Ansuman's like, hey, I'm done fighting. I'm going to school on Earth. He's like, hey, listen, whatever you want, man.
Yeah. Hulk was like Daniel Cormier to John Jones and Ansuman Radhakrishnan. Like, the real champ is somewhere, right?
Yeah, but decided to take a fucking break. So anyway, Ansuman says, hey, docs, hope both of you are doing well. We are indeed. Thank you. Was just wondering if it's a good idea to turn last week of my maintenance meso, ordinarily a deload, into an active rest week instead. Just to really heal up and lingering physiological and psychological fatigue. Right after this, I'm planning on starting my fat loss phase. We're taking active rest week. How would you implement this? I mean, I think that's fucking perfect, James.
Yeah. I mean, so when you really kind of break down the two, the deload and the active rest phase, from a volume and intensity standpoint, are virtually the same. Yep. The major difference between the deload and the active rest is the degree of specificity that you maintain with your training. So with the active rest, you kind of just do mostly whatever you want and just maintain your sense of autonomy and just say, this is what I want to do and I'm just going to do it. And that's great. The deload, you still have to kind of follow, for the most part, your regimen and follow the same exercises and da-da-da-da-da. So can we definitively say, one is going to be better than the other? I would say probably not. And if you are somebody who likes to break away from the grind, the rigidity of following the same structured plan all the time, and every now and again you like to have a little spice, a little variety, then the active rest might be a good choice. And you would basically implement it virtually the same way as a deload, except you would just kind of do what you wanted instead. If you're somebody who needs that structure and likes following the plan and doesn't want to deviate and is kind of afraid of stepping outside of the box, stick with the deload. I would say the effects are probably identical in a laboratory.
Yep. And he says, how would you implement this? Well, I would probably just show up to the gym like twice. Once for a heavier-ish full body workout on like a Monday. And then once for a way lighter full body workout, like super easy bullshit on Thursday. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the time, I wouldn't even go to the gym and I would just fuck around and do fuck all. So that, to put this in perspective, that Thursday workout should take you 30 minutes at most and could actually probably be done in like a living room. Just do some air squats and push-ups, do a couple pull-ups on a tree branch, and you're fucking good.
Yeah. I agree. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Did you catch the Joe Rogan with Lane Norton?
I didn't, but I heard really good things. Did you catch it?
I got through about maybe an hour and a half of it.
They're long.
And I lost steam on it because it was mostly good, but Lane just is like so long-winded and he really dominated the conversation, and they kind of kept going back and forth about different issues. And every now and again, Rogan would kind of try and rein it in and be like, okay, so what about, low carb versus high carb for sport instead of health, right? And then they would both, Lane would just go on this like individualization tangent, seemingly indefinitely, where he'd be like, "Oh, people respond differently," which is true and it's fine.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, the reason why he went on that rant is not for the sake of individualization, but for the sake of adherence to program, which I think we can both agree on is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
But it really just kept coming back to that. And I don't know. It was just, I was really hoping to hear them finally put the like fucking nail in the coffin. That's what I was really waiting for Lane to be like, dude, the low carb thing is not great for sport, with maybe a very slim exception of extreme endurance sport and, you know, carbs for the win for most other sports. And he just never quite got there. And it was just this like long-winded tangents. And I was disappointed. So I turned it off after about an hour and a half. But it wasn't bad. I'm not saying it was bad. It just wasn't what I wanted. I was like, here's the guy who's going to finally tell Joe Rogan, who's going to tell the world, if you're an athlete, don't do keto. And it just never quite got there.
Interesting.
Yeah. And maybe he did get there, you know, in the subsequent hour and a half that I didn't listen to, but I just lost steam at that point and gave up and threw in the towel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well.
Well, I'm going to check it out at some point. All right.
It's still good. It's still worth a listen.
Daniel Hacker says the idea of overhand versus underhand grips hitting different parts twice of the lats. Do you think there's any credence to this or just bro speak? He says as an underhand hitting more lower lat and overhand hitting more upper lat / back. Does this have any merit or is it simply lats anytime you roll you're hitting them? It's definitely not as simple as lats anytime you roll you're hitting them, depending on your angle of pull and probably the angle of your other joints like your wrists. There probably are differences in motor unit recruitment and in regional hypertrophy. So though we don't have much direct evidence or any in this particular case, saying that different grips hit the lats differently, I'm inclined to believe that is highly likely. How big of an effect is it? Probably very small, but I think there is definitely an effect.
You know who does a really, I would say, as far as kind of bro science goes, and don't like fucking attack me for this, but John Meadows actually talks about this kind of stuff all the time and different exercise variants that he uses to target different regions within the same muscle. Now, if you are somebody on RP Plus, I know you're probably more science minded and you might be like, but yeah, that's like T-Nation bro science stuff. Yeah, maybe it is. But if you want to hear somebody speak intelligently on that issue, I would actually point you to John Meadows, who seems to have a lot to say on different variants on grip and implement. Like he'll talk about like, okay, he does this cable or this grip variation for something very specific, and it's interesting. It's worth a listen if you're interested in like regional hypertrophy stuff. I would point you in that direction.
Well, good thing that you said that, James, because his next question is, who are some intelligent trainers / programmers in the field for both athletics and physique that you both pay attention to? But of course, awesome applicable information that's intelligent. Of course, Chad and Max. I know you both mentioned John Meadows.
There you go.
And Nick Tuminello before, but anyone else?
John's the only one who I would say in this particular context. Well, I've heard speak intelligently. I've heard plenty of bros science on like hit this head on the muscle, hit this. John's the only one who will say, "Hey, I like this because I feel it here, right? And this works really well for me. And this is something I'm showing to you for you to try. And maybe it's not good, you know, which I like. And that's just like, hey, these just giving you some exposure. Here's something that worked for me. If it doesn't work for you, maybe not, but give it a shot."
Yeah, I think on training, somebody who I don't agree with completely, but has a lot of very good points, very thought out, Jordan Peters, really jacked bodybuilder from the UK. And then in addition to that, I think that Shelby Starnes for diet is very good to listen to because she's a very rational person. It's turned a shitload of people pro. So those two guys come to mind. If you want to look into their stuff, I think you could definitely get some value out of it.
Dude, speaking of Chad, motherfucker incepted me this weekend. He got me so bad. So he sends me a text and he's like, "How crazy would it be if I like joined the local rugby club?" And I was like, "Well, it would be kind of crazy, but if it's something you're interested in, you should definitely give it a try." And then, of course, I was like, "Well, fuck, if he's gonna like play rugby, what am I doing over here? Am I gonna play? Do I have to join now? Thanks a lot, Chad. Fuck."
Dude, you guys should join the same rugby club. Just both walk in and be like, "Can we play?" And they're like, "Jesus fucking Christ!"
Yeah, Chad was like, "How much running is involved?" I was like, "Well, a lot."
More than you want.
I was like, "Try it out, and like, if you don't like it, then you don't have to worry about it." And I was like, "If you like it and you want to take it seriously, you might have to shed a few poundaroos to make your life easier. But other than that, yeah." So now he incepted me. So now I'm thinking about doing rugby again. Fuck.
That'd be sweet, man. Go get him, JMO.
Yeah, I'm getting my shelf life is slowly ticking away for that. Or not slowly, quickly ticking away.
Quickly ticking away for that. A lot of old guys do rugby, man. Fuck that.
Yeah, they're all fucked up and broken and don't have jobs.
Don't have jobs is not related to that, James. All right. Let's see. Oh, funny enough, I was looking at steroid use and intelligence, because there's some correlational data to say that they're negatively related. Like the
People
more steroids you use, the more intelligence you lose, so to speak. And there could be some.
You literally become a meathead.
Right. But there's a huge confounder problem that.
That's a hard one to.
So one of these studies, actually two of them have dosage ranges. So 10 years of use. The average range was like 1,300 milligrams a week, which is a lot. It's 1.3 grams. Use went anywhere from 250 milligrams a week, which is like HRT, all the way to 7 grams a week.
Oh, mama! Man.
The first thing that came to my mind is like, if you're dumb enough to do 7 grams a week as an average for 10 years, you were dumb as fucking rocks to begin with.
Yeah. Well, it's also too like there's even, this is gonna sound silly, but people who use lots of drugs may be more engaged in physical activity than intellectually stimulating activities, right? And that's a huge confounder where it's like, okay, if you're not using drugs or not using very many drugs, you might be doing more work, or you might be pursuing other interests. But if you're using a lot of drugs, you're probably spending a lot of time in the gym, not doing anything other than that.
100%.
So,
and the people that, to be honest, the people that use steroids on average, present parties excluded, of course, just tend to be fucking less intellectual, less intelligent people to begin with. Just right. More often fucking retarded.
And to your point, right? Like the guy who's going to be starting off on 7 grams, like somebody who's thought this through very carefully and systematically, or somebody who got advice from a bro and was very naive.
Exactly. I just think back to lifters, because they compare to lifters. I think back to drug-free lifters who are pretty strong versus drug-using guys. The average drug-free lifter is like a guy that likes to lift, but is like an engineer, in his actual job. And the average drug user guy is like a guy who like has been to jail a couple times. And, like, it's like a, no offense to the profession, is like a roofer or something. And you're just like, okay, Mike, I kind of see that these are not comparable. This is not a controlled study where you're administering drugs. So.
Yeah, intelligence stuff is really hard to study. I don't envy social scientists.
100%. All right, Sega Sangare says, "Hey guys, how would somebody probably feel?"
Sorry, did we do the last one?
Oh shit, we didn't. Oops. All right, sorry, Daniel Hacker. I understand shoulder presses are not necessary in a physique program overall, but what sort of programming instances would either of you program the move in a hypertrophy plan? Strongman. In a hypertrophy plan, JMO.
Hypertrophy for strongman.
Oh yeah, you're right. Totally. Personally, I really like the movement, but I'm having trouble finding where and when to program it. As of now, I only do a German resensitization phase, but this obviously not very often enough. Well, I got another alternative. So strongman is definitely the case, but if you're doing pure hypertrophy training for its own sake, you can put shoulder presses. So like you could have potentially 2 to 3 push days, right? So you could have a push day that is chest oriented with the other stuff, front delts, triceps on the back burner. Tricep oriented, where you still train all 3, but triceps are the focus. And you could have one where front delts are the focus, and then the other one's front delt or even front delt / clavicular pectoral, right? Incline moves. So you would do it on that day. Or if you split your pushing work into 2 sessions per week like I do, I have a chest-oriented push day and then a tricep-oriented push day. And on my tricep-oriented push day, I use shoulder presses with a relatively close grip with a barbell as a compound mega force-producing overloading tricep movement. Because they're a huge fucking, especially if you go all the way down to your clavicles and tuck your elbows in, they're a huge tricep movement. So it doesn't all have to be isolation for triceps. You can use shoulder presses for a while, and you can do some easier dumbbell presses just to keep the movement pattern going while doing heavy dips, and you can cycle back to shoulder presses. I think that when people say, dips are for triceps, dips are at least as much for chest as they are for triceps, as front delts are, or sorry, as shoulder presses are for front delts as they are for triceps. Like if you do shoulder presses the proper way, especially with an narrower grip, you fuck your triceps up hard. So give that some thought.
Yeah. I would also, if for hypertrophy, I would just avoid doing any standing shoulder pressing. At that point, it's an unnecessary trade-off. Just all seated at that point. Seated dumbbell, seated barbell.
Yep. All right. Sega Sangare says, hey guys, how would somebody probably feel like if they were to have a very high energy expenditure during a dieting phase, high level athlete kind of expenditure, and they would still have what is considered high calories for their body size compared to a scenario where they just train for physique and work a desk job? I'll tell you, super easy. The first category, high expenditure, high intake with the same rate of loss. Let's say they were getting really lean, would feel very tired, but not very hungry, because they're super high level expenditure, but they still eat food, but the expenditure is still higher than the eating because clearly they're during a dieting phase. So because of that high expenditure, they feel really worn out. But because it's still plenty of food, they would never really feel hungry. On the other hand, someone who works a desk job, trains for physique, wouldn't ever really feel as tired, like, fuck my body. They would just feel hungrier than shit.
Mm-hmm. It's a
good
answer. No, yeah, that you nailed it.
And everything in between. So notice there is, again, with the theme of today's webinar being trade-offs, there is no way to get out of both of those.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why we usually recommend somewhere in the middle, right? Where it's like, do some cardio, do some extra NEAT, diet a little bit.
Yep.
Hopefully it's not too painful.
Yep, 100%. 100%. All right. Luciano Bruno Koichel.
So spicy. I love that.
It's the spice that ends with a fucking kugel. It ends with a fucking gefilte fish at the end. Unbelievable.
We need more like good old American names. Where's like our fucking Mike Browns, our John Smiths?
Swear to God, there's not a single fucking American name on here. What the fuck is going on? All right. He says, hey, docs, or hello, docs, regarding questions answered in the webinar from 9/11, would you please mind clarifying?
That was terrible.
That was really terrible. You're going to fucking hell for that.
Never forget the webinar. Jesus.
Tim McInnes fucked you up from that shit. All right, so
okay, real quick. Sorry, Tim McInnes and I had like a joke because we went to the Tri-Cities flea market and there was a T-shirt with the Twin Towers, falling that said "Never forget September 11th, 2011." And we were like, wait a minute, what?
Oh my God, whoever made that shirt does not speak the English.
So language. we never forget was like a inside joke, I guess.
That's ridiculous. That makes sense that it was the shirt free or like $1?
No, I don't remember, but it was just one of those. You did like a double take, like, oh yeah, wait, huh? Wait, no, that's not right.
The 10-year anniversary really was fucked up, I guess. All right. Would you please mind clarifying why you would only increase intensity and not the number of sets if a muscle group is sore for 2+ days? Aha. If muscular hypertrophy is the goal, isn't the first priority of overload to increase the number of sets and secondly the intensity? So logically, you would increase the number of sets per muscle group and intensity if possible every microcycle until you hit MRV and then deload. So I think the way we're answering is if you were really fucking sore, that means you're getting pretty close to how much you can sustainably overload. And you're getting pretty close to causing so much muscle damage that your body's just going to be recovering from the damage and running out its resources in that direction versus having so much resource left over for adaptation. So if we're saying is if you do a week of training and your muscles get really sore, which is 2+ days, right? The next jump can't be that big because you'll run aground if you keep doing that. And that way, just increase the intensity. You're totally right. Hypertrophy is the goal. The first priority of overload is to increase number of sets. Absolutely, because that has a bigger effect, but it also has a bigger fatiguing effect. So we're intentionally saying, hey, don't increase as much as you could, just increase the intensity, keep the set numbers the same, and then if you're not super sore anymore, then you can slowly start inching back up.
Yeah, that was good. And just to give a differing opinion and just do some devil's advocate here, what we can also say is that 2+ days is not necessarily the benchmark that we want to go with, right? Really, we're looking at the SRA time course because, for example, I just trained chest yesterday. My pecs are sore as fuck today, but I know when Thursday or Friday comes around and I do my next chest workout, I might have been sore for 2 days or more, but did I actually recover enough to present an overload on the next chest session? Yes, I did. So it didn't actually matter that they were sore for 3 days because that was actually the recovery time course that I needed for my 2 sessions that week. Right. So don't get too caught up on the nitty gritty number stuff where you're like, oh, my legs were sore for 2 days, this and that. That means I can only increase intensity. Not necessarily. That's a good benchmark where we say, yeah, maybe you have some foresight and say you probably got some bad things coming your way if you try and push it. But that being said, if you're sore for a couple days, but you have still met the recovery criteria that we have defined as the ability to overload in the next session, you're good to go, even if you are still a little bit sore. So I totally agree with what Mike said, but just to give a different point.
Yep. Let me clarify that. So the 2+ days is for higher frequency training. So if you train a muscle group like 3 days a week, if it's sore for 2+ days, you get some intersection of soreness, right? So if you train 2 days a week, then 2+ days is totally okay, depending on how big that plus is. If you train once a week, you should be sore for like half the week, right? Now, that's probably not an ideal way to do things, but it's not that far off. And then, so his second question, and let me answer more completely after I read the second question. For someone using the male physique templates, would you recommend keeping the number of sets the same if DOMS exceeds 1 day? No. I would keep the number of sets the same if you're still really fucking sore or even pretty sore the next time you train that muscle. The good news is the autoregulation algorithm, the rating system, asks you those questions. You just fill that out honestly. It does that for you. But yeah, the reality is, here's where James said that he was sore, then he healed, then he overloaded again, so it was fine, so he can go up next week. Here's where James wouldn't go up. If he was sore in his chest after training it, and then the next time he trained it, which was like 3 or 4 days later, he was still pretty fucking sore. He'd be like, ooh, yeah. And then in that session, he got sore again to the point where he barely healed for the next week's Monday session or whatever. James would probably be like, I'm just going to keep the weight, go up and weight a little bit, keep the sets the same. So the real answer is, if you have a distinct time course between overload presentations in your microcycle where you get sore and you heal completely or very close to it, I don't mean heal completely as far as like all underlying damage. I mean, you don't have DOMS anymore the next time you train. You're good to go, and you get to increase volume as you see fit to hit your MRV. But if you have a lot of intersections of soreness where you are sore, you train again, still sore, you train again, still sore, don't go up in volume because you'll run yourself into the ground. It used to be a thing that DOMS was kind of mysterious, and people would ask, I'm like sore, should I still train? And people would be like, yeah, soreness doesn't mean anything, you should still train. That's fucking ridiculous. It's been shown pretty clearly that excessive damage interferes with hypertrophy. And of course, the other way around, like if you do no damage whatsoever, you do no disruption, you probably won't get much growth because your volumes, et cetera, will never be high enough. So that middle ground, somewhere in that middle ground, we don't know where, science hasn't said yet, is the best. So if you're super fucking sore consistently when you're trying to train your muscles, you got to not increase volume and wait till the soreness subsides. But if you're like not sore at all, you got to go up. Or even if you're healing well, you still go up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Next one, Marcia Balai. Marcia says, hey, docs, just want to take a moment and thank you guys for all the great information you provide. Always taking the time to answer questions. And fuck you, Marcia. James, don't you like my
the overly aggressive response? I love that. Fuck you.
Fuck you. You don't fucking thank me. I should. Oh man, Josh and Angie told me to do one of these webinars entirely in Philly guy voice. So.
Oh my god, too much East Coast. I tried to listen to the Rogan with the Mike Tyson's boxing coach guy.
Yeah, Teddy Atlas.
Oh my god,
James, isn't it amazing? He just legitimately talks like that 100% of his entire life.
Dude, he actually had some really interesting points to say about the corruption, especially. I thought was really interesting.
Oh yeah, dude, that podcast is fucking incredible. Like he sounds like a Philly guy, but he's real sharp and he knows a ton of shit. And he says whatever about 1,000 times.
Yeah, you got to get through if you can get through the East Coast accent and the East Coastness and actually listen to what he's saying, there's a lot of gems in there.
Whatever, there's gems or not. Fuck off. Marcia, thank you so much, by the way, for that very kind words. Okay.
Yeah.
Today's question is all about two-a-days. Never-ending debate on how to do more work, brother. Yep. LOL, but on a serious note, I feel that some of my workouts get very long or I just get drained at the end and would like to experiment with two-a-day training for some workouts. Currently running the advanced 6-day per week MPT, which is actually a great candidate program to jump into a 2-a-day, because we'd recommend that you just, like, if you were running a 4-day program, we'd just be like, just go to 5 or go to 6. With some modifications to make them fit my needs and volume landmarks. The only problem is that I can only train in the late evening and can't make it 2 times a day to the gym right now. So my only option would be to train the smaller body parts at home in the morning and the larger ones in the gym in the evening. The problem here is that even with 10 to 14 hours between the workouts, can the smaller muscle groups recover enough as to not hinder the evening workouts, i.e. biceps and rear delts in the AM 10 to 14 hours later, back in the late PM, or should I train biceps and side delts in the AM, back in the PM, and triceps and side delts in the AM, back in the PM, biceps and rear delts the next day in the AM, followed by chest and front delts in the PM.
Yeah.
Okay. The second one is, I think, very, very much the better one. So I would definitely, so if you have to do 2-a-days, I wouldn't train limiting factor muscles earlier in that day and then train the big compounds later. Right. I would train the sort of uninvolved muscles earlier and then train the big muscles. And then the next, 48 hours later or whatever, almost, you're going to be training the muscle again. So the triceps and side delts in the AM, back in the PM, great, no interference. Biceps and rear delts the next day, totally fine. Because, here's the deal. Your back tires them up, but not much, right? And it's not a limiting factor where, like, you're really fuck them up. Like, because if you do a lot of biceps and rear delts, you will actually prevent your back from getting as much of a stimulus as it could. And then chest and front delts later. I think that there's so much time has passed since they did triceps. I think that's a real good.
Yeah. So the one just factor to conundrum, which Mike already stated, but just keep in mind, like, if you train the limiting factor muscles first, right, you're essentially defeating the purpose of doing the 2-a-days, because you've increased the quality of the smaller muscle groups, but it's coming at the expense of the bigger ones, and then secondarily, then on the smaller ones again. So I would avoid doing that when possible, because you kind of get into a conundrum where you're like, oh, I'm doing 2-a-days, but what is the net positive, negative? I would say it's probably the same if you're training like your triceps before bench. You know what I mean? Like, you get better tricep workout, but then your bench workout sucks. So what's the net balance there? I would say, probably roughly the same. Maybe not, maybe even negative at that point. So just be careful with that. You might kind of defeat the purpose of doing the 2-a-days. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But I think the best way to do it is the second way you describe, where non-interfering muscles are trained before the ones you have to train.
Yes.
Because basically my question would be, should I use a push-pull leg split, or do smaller muscles push and larger muscles pull in one day, and so on? I mean, I think you can still do a push-pull leg split, but you'll have to take push-pull legs to mean only the big compound, the big muscles of push-pull legs, and then smaller muscles, rear delts, side delts, biceps, potentially triceps that recover faster for you, and sprinkle them in a way that doesn't interfere with the dosing of the other ones, preferably after they're used. Right?
You can get creative with that.
Super creative, yeah. Another problem would be that if I were to say back in the PM and biceps the next day in the AM, would there probably be less time between the sessions? Not a big difference, but still about 2 to 3 hours. But that time would be spent sleeping, which is the king of recovery. Well, yeah, and also here's the deal, real quick. Unless you really want to focus on biceps, fundamentally it needs analysis has to occur, which is, what do you want, back or biceps? Which one do you want more? But fundamentally, because back takes more work, it's more overloading, it's more difficult, it's more disruptive, and it tends to be a bigger muscle, it tends to be more of a focus. Back, you should train fresher. You can still do a good job training biceps if they're a little beat up from back. The other way around might not be as true. Right. So I think it still makes more sense to do back in the evening and then biceps in the AM the next day. Are you going to have your ideal bicep workout? No, but you can probably compensate with straight volume in number of sets for most of the fatigue. Where with back, there's going to be some kind of quality detriment there where I just don't think you can make it up nearly as much.
Now, what I'm not sure if I'm reading too deeply into this, but he says, but that time would be spent sleeping, which is the king of recovery. So if what you're saying is, if I'm interpreting this correctly, you would now wake up earlier than normal and potentially get less sleep to do the second workout.
I would think he's saying that.
Okay, I'm going to put it out there just in case. That would be a net negative, because now everything will suffer. You're doing a 2-a-day, which is great, but now it's coming at the cost of everything else. So
really glad you said that. Definitely nothing at the expense of sleep.
Yeah. I don't know if that was what you were saying, but I just wanted to put that out there.
I think he's saying that, like, if he does biceps in the AM, back in the PM, it's a 13-hour difference. But if he does back in the PM, biceps next AM, it's only a 10-hour difference. And he's saying, but that 10 hours is spent sleeping, and sleep's so good for recovery. Maybe 10 hours of sleep is better than 13 hours of walking around the office, so on and so forth.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe some of that's just time courses. Like, it doesn't matter if you sleep or if you're awake, it still takes a certain number of hours to recover. Not even recover, just put in motion hypertrophy stuff. I still think the sequencing is the most important part. So if you do biceps in the morning, back in the evening, you're kind of fucking yourself one way or the other. Even if it was, 16 hours later, I think you'd still be pretty fucked. But the other way around doesn't fuck you nearly as much.
So I think one thing that's you probably piecemealed together here is doing the 2-a-day thing is great, and whenever possible, probably should if you want to be really jacked. But right at the same time, because the practicality of that training style is very limited, it's going to come with some trade-offs. So really what you have to look at is like, what is the net balance of the trade-offs that I'm making to do 2-a-days? Is it worth it? Or was I really just better off doing one session 6 times a week in the first place? Only you can make that call. And it might be some trial and error, and you might have to do some data collection on your own.
Yeah, agreed. Next question from him is, yet another curiosity of mine is regarding nutrition for 2-time-a-day training. I understand the need to have fast protein and fast carbs and lots of carbs in general following a heavy AM session. But what if the heavy session is in the PM? Going back to my biceps and side delts, an AM back in the PM example, should I have my post-workout shake and post-workout meal after the back workout? Because this would actually be the heavy main workout of the day. I think you should have a post-workout shake and meal after both. And I think that there is definitely a good argument for having way more food than you usually would in the evening after a big back workout in the evening. So I would definitely have a casein shake at night.
So saying both doesn't imply that both of those are symmetrical either, right? You would still bias the majority of your carbohydrates. So you would first increase your daily carbohydrates for the 2 daily sessions, right? But then you would still bias more of that carbohydrate in the evening, and then maybe take out some of the midday carbs because you're going to have another bolus in the AM right after your first session. So that's kind of how it would look.
Yanni, sorry. Thanks, and as always, sorry for the long-ass question. And then he goes, P.S. This would be a great topic to further discuss in the hypertrophy book you guys are working on. It will be discussed. It's already in the contents. BPS going to order the new MPT's OMG 5-to-1 paradigms. Is it Christmas already?
You say that
Hopefully
now.
Hopefully you survive them.
Yeah.
Week 5, you'll wash up on a fucking Italian beach.
I've only written 2 5-to-1s for clients so far. 2.
Yep. The change here is that the increase in intensity is very small from move to move, and also the MEV is really, really small. So it's a bit of a leap from us. I think it's going to work, but it's definitely going to require diligence with the ratings. But if you fuck yourself up too early, there's the -2 option to get you the fuck out of some shit. So there's that.
Yeah, it should be good.
Yep. All right, Felipe Machado. Who the fuck is Felipe Machado? I never heard of this guy.
Ironically, we met him in Ireland, of all places.
Yep. Felipe is the fucking man. Hey, docs. The RP University, very good, is so good, but taking 10 minutes to find out where we stopped the last video was quite annoying, at least for me. Having a couple hours straight to watch isn't ever an option. Is there anyone we can talk to? Yes.
I'm not understanding. So does he mean like if he's watching a video that's 30 minutes long or something, and
yeah, he doesn't like to. He wants to know where he stopped the video and to have it pick up where he stopped instead of logging back in and having it be fresh.
Oh, I see.
So I think you should message me or James. Message me, Felipe Machado. You know how to reach me, and I will put you in touch with the person who you can sort of file a complaint with. Is it technically possible for us to do anything in the medium term for that? Maybe. But at some point, it's great that you're saying this. So please send me a message, and we'll get this passed along to the tech people who run the site. All right. And he said, I think I've watched the first 15 to 25 minutes of Mike's balancing weights and BJJ about 5 times this week. I'm even singing that intro song in my mind right now. So cool, isn't it? My girlfriend hates it. How could she? You don't have a girlfriend, motherfucker. Stop lying to people. The webinar format is great. We can see which ones we've watched and where we stopped at them. Oh, interesting. So I guess
okay. So maybe we can make that uniform across all videos.
Yeah, I guess you can't stop the. Interesting. I didn't know you can't scroll with the other videos. By the way, the volume discussion thing. Oh boy, thanks very much, Docs. I think he's talking about the Lyle McDonald, James Krieger, Brad Schoenfeld nuclear war, in which Lyle has dishonored himself and James Krieger ascends to Knight of Templar.
I don't know why people get so heated.
Because Lyle's not well.
Well, I mean, aside from that, but there are other people, like even Jeremy Lenicky will get real heated. You know, our old advisor, Doc Stone, and who we respect immensely, often gets too heated about some of these things. I mean, we're getting heated about questions that sometimes can't even be answered. You know, it's like we have a okay idea of what's going on. Maybe we don't know. It's just like a lot of opinion and conjecture, and people get really mad about it. And it's like
really mad.
You can't get mad. Nobody knows. It's just what you think.
Yep. Agreed. All right, Jeff Hearn says, "Hey guys, I recently competed in a classic physique comp this past Saturday as a natural. I was told by the judges they need to focus on taking more steroids.
Nah.
Then I need to focus on increasing size in my upper body to match my quads.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. I plan on competing again probably in early 2020. That's when the Robot Wars will be happening, so good luck competing." James, can you imagine that 2020 is going to be coming up?
It's kind of crazy to think about.
It's really fucking super crazy. During that time, 2020, that's so weird to read. During that time, would it be smart to put legs at either MV or MEV for the entire time? I think MEV probably, Jeff, if I know your training age like I think I do, MEV, not MV. Which volume landmark do you think would benefit the situation the most? My quads grow with very little volume. Also, was not very lean in my legs for the show. Any idea what would be the cause of this? Well, you just got to get fucking leaner is what the cause of that is, or what the solution is. I don't know about the cause. You get leaner all around and you're genetics. Good to go. Yeah. It's like Jared Taylor has the same thing. Jared has like a really fat ass, so by the time he has striated glutes, the rest of his body is ridiculous looking, which isn't not a big problem. So I think that what you can do is the following. Stick them to MEV so they still grow a little bit and see how your upper body's growing. If your upper body's growing not so great, and if you feel the fatigue from your quads really affecting your upper body, then try them at MV for a while. And then when your upper body really starts to take over your legs, throw them back to MEV. So experiment, but neither one's the wrong answer. You just got to give it about a year and sort of examine how far your upper body's come and how far your legs have come. And if your legs are like even bigger than ever compared to your upper body, then you definitely have to move them to maintenance volume. But I would move them to MEV first to see if that works, because then you kind of get the best of both worlds. Whereas moving them right to MV, it just may not be something that's necessary. James?
I would only add, you might go to MV if you were competing sooner, right? So if you were planning on competing in 2019 instead of 2020,
then you got to make the changes. Mm-hmm.
You got to make abrupt changes, and at that point, it might be worth taking the legs down to MV and really, really ramping up the upper body changes on the subsequent mass phase. But because you have a lot of time, I think Mike's suggestion is really good. Start at MEV, and if you find that you're not either progressing or the leg volume is still kind of keeping you back from doing more, then move it down if you need to, and then ramp up the upper.
Yep. All right, Cole.
Mike, I'm gonna grab a drink real quick. Sorry to bug out.
Do you mind if I read this?
Oh, no, go right ahead.
Okay. Cole Dano. Sounds like an MMA fighter's name. With the new updated templates coming out, I'd love to hear your thoughts on choosing how many days to work out. My main concern with fewer days is the workout's getting too long. I've run a 4-day and a 6-day on the old templates and found it to be a tricky balance between getting some days off, keeping the length of the workouts reasonable. Also, while I'm asking about the new templates, is exercise order and selection the same as before? It's exactly the same as before. These are minor updates. I'm currently running the powerlifting hypertrophy 5 days, but have made some serious hacks for my needs. However, after listening to your comments on the templates or your general S&C, I'm looking to go back to the physique templates, especially now with them being updated. So James, the question here is, what are kind of the trade-offs between 4-day and 6-day templates, tricky balance between getting some off days and keeping the lengths of the workouts reasonable? I'm going to answer first because James probably has the better answer here. I think rule number one is only ever pick a template with workout number that you can do reliably. So like if you basically like most weeks can't get 6 days in, but you can get 5 days on pretty much every week, don't get the fucking 6-day one, get the 5-day one. But if you can reliably hit all the workouts, I would say the more workouts per week you do, the better, because it spreads the volume out more evenly, get better intensity, you better quality workouts, better frequency, probably more hypertrophy. James?
Yeah, so I think I had a really good point, and I just blanked out. Was going to make a comment about muscle fiber typing again, because I think, more often than not, I would push people towards the 6-day with the constraint that you have already mentioned. Like whatever you can do the most consistently is probably the bigger overriding factor. That being said, the more frequency, generally the better. I would say if you are somebody, I was going to make a point about slow twitch and fast twitch, and I just can't remember. I had a really good point when I was listening to you speaking. Now I just dropped it. Fuck. Yeah. With the 4-day, right? Because you have to cram so much stuff in there, it becomes really, really difficult if you are somebody who tends to be really fast twitch, because towards the end you start to really crap out. Whereas people who are more slow twitch can kind of get away with it more, I would say. And by get away with it, I mean that they can maintain a higher intensity and probably not take any huge hits to their growth from the latter portion of their workouts. With that being said, they're probably not going to be getting a lot of growth anyway, right? So it's probably not a huge deal. I think, though, if you're somebody who is more fast twitch, you might find that splitting it up is really, really in your benefit, because you might only be able to, if you have like a really, really low MEV because you're so fucking strong, doing the 4 days is stupid at that point, unless it's the best that you can do, right? Because you're gonna get pooped out at some point in that workout from doing all the stuff, when the reality is all you needed was 30-45 minutes of workout to get a really, really good growth or strength response. And that's when the 6-day becomes really, really handy, where you don't need much to get going, right? And it's really short and it fits into your schedule really nice. If you're more slow twitch, either one is good. But you can kind of get away with doing the 4-day stuff a little easier, just because you can hang in there longer. But I still would push you towards a higher frequency. But yeah, ultimately you have to make the trade-off between like what is practical for you, and for some people 6 days a week is just not that practical, because their schedule is maybe more variable. Maybe you got kids, and kids get into all sorts of shenanigans. They get sick, they get in trouble. No, seriously, right? And it's like you might be like, oh yeah, I can work out 6 days a week when my son isn't I have to pick him up from school because he got in trouble, or because Susie's sick, or because my husband is like out of town and now I got to pick up the slack, and whatever. So the quick TLDR version is, if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of outside responsibilities and can dedicate a lot of time to training, I would move to 6 days as much as you can. For most people, the consistency is the bigger factor. And that's really, I would love to sit and talk about the minute points that we can make within this, but ultimately the end all be all answer is, what are you going to do on a regular basis? And that's what Mike already said. And that's the bigger overriding factor. I mean, we can talk about intra-session MRVs, weekly MRVs, and all that stuff, but really it's like, what are you going to get in the gym and do every time? That's more important.
Yeah, that was very good, James.
It was a ramble.
I only actually picked up one thing from that. When you said kids go to school, that brings me to my predictable segue of football.
School.
You've been playing a foosball behind my back.
I have a client right now who their son, I think it was their son or their child, whatever, they had some issues at school, and it's normal. It's not unusual, right? And that threw them off, because it ended up being a big deal and it required a lot of time and effort to resolve. And their schedule got fucked up, and they told me, like, in their weekly email, like, hey, I couldn't finish my peak week. My diet was all crazy because I was like spending a lot of time at the principal and some other stuff and da-da-da-da. It's a real thing. Like, especially if you're, I don't want to just say a mom, but like if you're a parent, that's a major consideration that most of us don't have if you don't have kids. So.
Dude, word up.
I was a problem child. My mom had to pick me up from daycare and school all the time. I was getting in trouble.
Piece of shit.
I know.
All right. Yevgeny Roshai is back, and he says, hello, Satan's acolytes. Hello, indeed. So last time there were no questions from me after listening to the recent Sports Scientist podcast with Max Ada.
That was a shit show. That
I
was
was
so
preoccupied with slaughtering goats that were near death state for 6 days, 6 hours, and precisely 6 minutes, and then centrifuging their blood to extract the blessings of the Dark Lord.
If you think that he's just joking, that's actually what we talked about.
He's not joking at all. After consuming the end product, everything changed, and I never felt the same again. Now that's hopefully behind me, some questions. First of all, that Satan is never behind you. Only in the literal sense is he literally behind you right now.
That also made me think, did you ever see the Venture Brothers with the Galactic Inquisitor?
Ignore me.
Ignore me.
All right. Now, when that's blah, 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 blah. All right. Number one, cutting and peripheral infections. Have you noticed that when you get a peripheral infection on a cut, it does get better, but somewhat slower, and sometimes minor symptoms persist during the entire cut, and only when one gets a deload maintenance, calories or symptoms fully disappear? Absolutely, and it's completely predictable.
Yeah, so hard training in general, but even more so when you're on a cut, makes you immunocompromised. It's a common symptom, and actually to the point of where that hard training, because you're immunocompromised, can push you over the edge, and often sickness is a common symptom of overreaching and overtraining. Very, very predictable.
James, are you down with the sickness?
Oh, I was so down with that. I was so down with that. And they were from Chicago, so it was like a hometown thing, right? Oh man, I was all over that.
And the other hits, including "No Man in the Moon."
What was that video? Was so funny. I can't remember what they were saying.
Nothing. It was like just sounds.
It was some gibberish, but it was like it was consistent. He always said the same. It was like nama nama na or something like that.
And other hits.
Manamana.
All right. I like that they at the end are like, Mamana. They're like, yeah.
That was so good. They did a really good job. And at the end of the video, they were nice, and they were like, we're only poking fun because we like them so much.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Number two, once again, thermic effect of food. So on the basis of what you said during the previous Q&A, is my understanding correct that the thermic effect of food, TEF, is already subtracted from the general 4 and 9 caloric values used for carbs, proteins, fats? Yes.
Yes.
So I tried searching online and unfortunately couldn't find any materials on the topic, so the TEF is already accounted for in the caloric values of macronutrients. Is this something you read in textbooks? Yes, multiple textbooks throughout my very long sports science education.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I've read a bunch of articles, and they say TEF may not matter much, but nowhere could I find the statement that the 4 and 9 calorie values account for it. Please explain in a possible time where I can find more about it. Well, any intro to nutrition, not sport nutrition, intro to nutrition textbook will have those contents. Because I use Excel to count my daily energy needs, and one of the components I account for is TEF, I just would stop doing that.
Just don't. There's no point.
Yeah. I mean, unless you use the real protein values, which are like 5.8 and 6.1 and shit, depending on the amino acid string.
At that point, you might as well be measuring your like RMR in a calorimeter at that point.
Yeah, might as well just live in a lab.
Yeah.
I don't account for it. It will be the difference between dying on a cut and week 1.5, because the deficit would be several hundred calories higher. And not gaining dick on a mass phase, because I'll probably be gaining. I know all the equations in the world are only rough best estimates, yes, and tracking body weight, and it's changes that we should look to end guide changing calorie intake, but because RP Plus is all about splitting hairs and anal stuff, yeah, totally. Yeah. I would not, if you're doing the 449, I would not count the thermic effect.
Yeah, there's nothing, you don't gain anything because that is already factored into the calorie estimate for our macronutrients. So you don't, it's just another hassle for you that you don't gain anything from.
Yep. Number 3, side delts, intrasession MEV, and frequency. So up until recently, I've been training my side delts twice a week on Tuesday, higher volume, higher intensity, moderate volume, and Thursday, lower intensity, higher volume. There was a problem by the time I would reach my next macrocycle, and again, train side delts on Tuesday, next microcycle, I think. I would actually get slightly weaker on the movement and couldn't add reps nor progress in RAR in the same way they use. I think he means next microcycle.
Okay.
I would actually get slightly weaker on the movement and couldn't add reps nor progress in RAR with the same weight I used last week.
Okay.
Then on Thursday, I would actually hit a weight and rep PR, sometimes with weights higher than I used on Tuesday. Okay. That definitely means you're under volume like crazy. So I came to a conclusion that my SRA curves were totally diminished by the time Thursday session, and I actually started to lose adaptations by the time once again reached the first side delt training session of the next microcycle. Maybe that might be happening. There might be some interference from other muscles.
It takes a lot to really, and in this case,
to
lose
really reduce
muscle. Like, man.
Yeah, that's unlikely, but let's go with it for a bit. So I corrected this issue by adding a mini side delt session on Sunday. Just 2 sets of moderate intensity and moderate volume. Now I no longer have these awkward fluctuations, and the progression is steady. So my question is, if such side delt training scheme is utilized, should the smaller Sunday session be an intra-session MEV or intra-session MV? 2 sets for side delts are unlikely to be at MEV, at least for what I feel, but it does the job preventing adaptation loss. I think that you can probably experiment based on those results with even more than 2 sets during that time, and actually raising the volume even higher in general all around for all the workouts, because I think you're probably underdosing like crazy. So I wouldn't even worry about the MV, MEV stuff. I would just go to MEV plus on all of those workouts and see how that goes.
Yeah, and just to entertain the question, so you if you say MV, it's because you're concerned that you're actually losing adaptation throughout the half a week or whatever, right? And so what we're saying is that is very unlikely. So training at maintenance volume with, if you're going to call it the intra-session MV, is also not a good use of your time, because why are you even training it at that point if you're trying to get better? So I would, like Mike said, more than 2, but certainly you would consider the intra-session MEV in that case. So if you're going to do it more or less, because you're not going to be losing fitness realistically in that time.
Yeah.
Or at least any substantial amount.
Totally agreed. Number 4, related to the previous one, starting a massing mesocycle at MEV, splitting sets between workouts and hitting intra-session MEVs for body parts that have an emphasis style training approach. So the beginning of a massing mesocycle, one should ideally aim for MEV for a muscle group. However, for some body parts like back and legs, I have some difficulties assigning per session MEV set values. Back, for example, let's assume MEV is 10 divided by 2. Training sessions is 5 plus 5. One session is horizontal emphasis, the other vertical. So 3 plus 2 horizontal versus vertical seems more or less optimal, but it's 2 sets for horizontal, even MEV, perhaps MV. I think, so in light of the fact that you just did 3 sets of vertical, the 2 sets of horizontal is going to be for sure MEV for the lats, but for the rhomboids and teres major and traps, it might be at MV, right? Because the lats get all of the 5 sets of work just from different angles, but the rhomboids, teres major, and traps might only get the rowing volume or the horizontal pulling. So it might be maintenance volume for them, depending on some other constraints. Same for legs, 1 quad day emphasis and the other hamstring emphasis. Let's say quad day MEV is 8 and ham is 6. Quad emphasis day, quads 6 sets and hams 2 sets. Can 2 sets for hams be MEV? I think it can be MEV. And remember, MEV, once you start to break MEVs and MVs down into sub-week fractions, you start to get into very, I don't call it dismal science, but there's so much unknown there that I would just use it from a fatigue management perspective more than anything. Forget about MV, MEV for just a little at the sub-week scale and be like, okay, is the purpose of this workout to just retain my adaptations and thus train very easy but still hit it, or to get some good work in, and then decide from there. I wouldn't worry about the MEV, MV, so on and so forth. Because remember, 0 sets for half a week could be MV if you did enough sets in the first part of the week.
Yeah, so it's like Mike said, it's difficult, but I would kind of consider it, in my mind, the way I would think of it, aside from actually explicitly using an MV, would be whatever you're training is being trained at MAV throughout the week, whatever that ends up being. And the secondary thing, like horizontal pulling after a vertical pulling emphasis, right, would be at essentially MEV for that session. But you're splitting hairs at that point again, right? So it's hard. It's difficult to say.
Yeah. Let's see. In reverse, ham emphasis day, 4 sets of hams, 2 sets of quads. For some reason, I think that the end European accent, please. For some reason, I think that the end, it doesn't really matter. And after 2 heavy working sets, one gets a pump, feels like it was challenging and can tick the boxes. For MEV indicators, that is okay. Yeah, totally. So that's where the Ghetto MEV calculator comes in super handy, where it's like, look, did you feel like you trained it? Yeah, then you probably did. Also, for body parts that are trained with emphasis de-emphasis paradigm, and for the emphasis de-emphasize body part, should/can one aim for intra-session MEV or MV? I assume both are viable options. Both are viable options depending on what it is you want to do. And that gets into a very, very complicated discussion of what the rest of your program looks like. So basically, like, if you want the next workout to be another good workout with good progressive overload, the de-emphasis workout can be MEV, and the next workout can be MEV to MRV somewhere. But if you want the next workout to be a huge workout where you have to have all your shit together, you actually want to drop fatigue from the last workout to this next one, then it has to be at MV. So hopefully that makes sense. For example, if you're like a power lifter, you have a big ass squat day, your squats after a deadlift day on Thursday should be at MV, so that you can really have a great squat workout on Monday. That's, MAV. But if you're a bodybuilder, then you probably should spread your volume out a little bit more evenly. You do some leg press work, 4 sets maybe on Thursday, because you need to hit squats on Monday, but you don't need to like have the stellar performance. You just need to overload. James, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I'm actually willing to one-up you on this. I'm curious what you think on this. So because the time scale of adaptive decay is relatively long, right? If you are in a situation where one of your muscle groups is kind of fucked up and you're saying, oh, this session should be a recovery session, I should be closer to MV. The reality is, with week to week or within a mesocycle, it's virtually impossible to actually decondition, especially if we're talking about losing muscle mass under very reasonable conditions.
For sure.
So what I would one up and say, you could probably train below what would typically be an MV, right? You could do like one set, and you're not going to lose anything. You will
just to maintain technical proficiency.
Exactly. You're just maintaining the movement characteristics. You get a little blood flow in there. It's something. But could you really say, well, I trained below what would be my MV for my rhomboids on this one day, right? Am I actually atrophying my rhomboids? Fuck no.
No, of course not.
That's only going to happen over the course of several mesocycles of undertraining. So you can take it down. What I'm saying is, you can take it down pretty low in the short term and get a lot of recovery and lose
just
almost
make sure
nothing.
There's a good reason to take it down.
Right.
It's really a matter of, do you want to be recovered for this next session a ton, or do you want to do more volume throughout the week? I think in a power lifter for peaking, the first answer is clearly the best. The answer for a bodybuilder in almost all cases is the second answer. Like, people in bodybuilding here, and here's something that really quick that I'm going to rant on, and I think James might have some more to say. Some things that groups of people do that they accept as revealed, they accept as just accepted wisdom, accept as wise, might be because everyone in that group is a very similar demographic and they never even thought to do it differently. Here's an example. Why do bodybuilders, what's one of the number one reasons why bodybuilders train once a week? Well, because they're advanced ones, it probably works best for them, so on and so forth. But another big reason that we can't discount is bodybuilders are mostly males that have a shitload of fucking testosterone, artificial or natural. They're ego-driven maniacs, and they honestly want to thrash whatever body part they're training. Like, so they'll say, the reason I train once a week is I can't recover if I train twice a week. And it's like, what does training mean to you? They're like, fuck, everything to failure, 30 sets of body parts, 5 exercises. And you're like, well, no, fucking shit, you can't. But why don't you just do 15 and 15? And they're like, fuck that. That's not a workout. It's like, of course it's a fucking workout.
It's like an ego challenge.
Exactly. So we got to be sort of asking the question of, are bodybuilders sometimes training a little bit too much like powerlifters, where they overvalue single session performances? Like, I think 2 very good leg sessions is better for growth in almost all cases, not all, than 1 amazing leg session and another barely there leg session. Like, if you're like doing fewer sets of leg press, like only 2 sets of leg press where you could have done 6, and someone's like, hey, why? You're like, because I got a big squat workout coming up next Monday and I want to heal for it. Like, is somebody recording you on video? Are you trying to hit these big rep PRs? And why? Like, if the purpose of bodybuilding is to spread out your volume throughout the week in an intelligent way that keeps you safe, but lets you do a lot of volume, because that's by far what gets you big. So do what's good for that instead of trying to bias your shit. Like, look, if you want to peak all the time, Just train once a week. You'll be really recovered every time, but it's been shown that once a week training doesn't work as well for almost all people as multiple time a week training. The thing with multiple time a week training is you never do feel that great at any one session, but you get more good quality sessions in.
Yeah, and I think this is a parallel discussion for a lot of things in life, right? Where what I think ultimately is kind of what you're alluding to is like, don't just buy into ideological views where people say like this is how it's done, right? Most of you on RP Plus are here because you have critical thinking skills, and you say like, okay, I like see some value in this, I see some value in that, and I'm not quite able to piece it together, and hopefully Mike and I are able to help you do that. But you don't just adopt something because a lot of people seem to accept it, right? That's when having the ability to think for yourself and break down the pros and cons and break down the mechanisms and what does the science say. That's why all of you are here. And that's why we praise you for being here, because you have a critical mind. Really, you just don't want to get into like the ideological, like, well, all bodybuilders do this, so of course it must be right. Yeah, maybe they do. And maybe there's some good things about that. Maybe there's some bad things about that too. And maybe we should know what those are. So,
yeah. You always got to take seriously, sort of wisdom passed down from generations. You always have to take it seriously. You can't be like, oh, fuck, they don't know anything. Like, no, they probably know some stuff. They probably know a lot, but you always have to look at it with a skeptical eye. It's always a balance there.
mm-hmm.
And he says, P.S. Dr. Mike, I registered for the Clinical Athlete Q&A called The Comeback Plan, Organizing Your Post-Injury Weight Training. I guess I'm doing that like tomorrow or something. Yep. And it better be, that's actually me presenting that one. I'm a guest presenter about how to come back from injury and organize your weight training. And it says it better be good.
Wait, you with Quinn or a separate thing?
It's just I'm on their webinar, and I'm like taking over and doing an entire hour long.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, they're great. I like
nothing about injury on my end, but about after you're healed from the injury, as far as the doctor is concerned, how do you come back to weight training? Because so many people make so many fucking crazy mistakes where they're like, oh, just hit a 3RM, like a week out after having not used their legs for 6 months. Like, well, you're an idiot.
Why did you do this?
The Comeback Plan, Organizing Your Post-Injury Weight Training, and it better be good. I will not be attending live, unfortunately, because I hate Dr. Mike. What an asshole.
Fair enough.
But in reality, my time zone is something like 2 to 3 o'clock at night.
Oh, yeah. You forget we get a lot of European people, right?
For real. And we know how important it is.
I feel your pain. I try to watch rugby, and I can't because you got, like what's normal for you is the same, 2 or 3 in the morning.
Right? California and Europe are really far apart from each other.
Yeah, it sucks.
PSS, postscript script. I wondered if someone in the RP Plus is a dedicated Christian, probably, and outright offended with all the satanic shit. Best wishes. I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe.
Thanks. All a joke. Or is it?
Maybe. All right. Let's go to the thing.
Let's go. I've got the thing open. Daniel Hacker says, James, the new recovery video is fantastic. You knocked it out of the park.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad that got posted. Because we record them in advance, and so there's sometimes a little delay, but I'm glad that you enjoyed. Awesome.
Yeah. Good job, James, you cocksucker.
Also, on that note, this isn't really a secret. I don't really have to hide it or anything, but I'm in the end stages of posting Recovering from Training, the audiobook version on Audible. Very cool.
Holy shit. That's awesome.
So it should be on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes very soon.
Wow. That's really cool.
Pretty neat.
All right. A gentleman named Eagles Syndrome.
I saw that. And he's Australian, apparently.
Yeah.
Or we don't even know if it's a
Oh, you sick cunts. Yeah, sick cunt is pretty Australian. On a serious note, thank you for your sage wisdom ahead of time for doing what you do every week. The webinars have quickly become one of the highlights of my week. Well, awesome. They are the low points of our week. We hate each other, and this is all for show.
No.
No. I have utilized an approach for mini cutting in the past with James Mini Cutting in the past, and was wondering if you could critique its merits. Oh boy. Oh boy.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Day 1, full body glycogen depletion. 6 sets per body part. Day 2, full body glycogen depletion.
Oof.
Day 3, 30 to 45 minute list cardio fasted yohimbine HCl. Oh shit.
Do you get a big old cardio boner?
Yeah, list cardio fasted with yohimbine HCl. Day 5, full body workout with heavier weights to facilitate glycogen loading, followed by carb load. Day 6, low volume strength workout, 4 main lifts. Day 7, rest. During depletion days, I'm at about a 1,200 calorie deficit and don't exceed 50 grams of carbs, or about 50 grams of fat, leaving protein about 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of lean body weight or body weight. The carb load is negative 3,500 calorie surplus with fats kept as low as possible. The carb load is a 3,500 calorie surplus. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I was just thinking like that's some. I'm going to do some math here. 3,500 divided by 4 is 875 grams of carbs. Am I?
Yeah, but that's on top of normal.
Oh man,
that's really insane. I'm able to run.
That's under a 1,200 deficit. What's your base calories at? Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I am able to run 4 weeks of this routine before diet fatigue sets in. And by then, I'm typically where I want to be in terms of leanness. Using this approach, I'm able to lose 2 pounds a week, controlling for ridiculous water fluctuations that occur within the week. After the carb load, I'm able to hit PRs on 1 or 2 of the strength lifts, typically bench and deadlift. My primary concern is the sparing of LBM. I know that low carb states aren't optimal for sparing LBM. I'm wondering if the carb load, high protein intake, and moderate volume might help attenuate that. Some other considerations are that I'm not using this approach to go much lower than below 10% body fat. I'm considering getting a DEXA scan pre and post cut. Would this be the best way to assess potential losses in BM? Absolutely not. It'll detect almost entirely body water at that, so we'll just nip that in bud. As far as why I don't just utilize a simple caloric deficit and keep carbs high, there's something about carbs that don't keep me highly satiated during a cut, contrary to a mass where I know I have tons of wiggle room to pile more in. Also, glycogen depletion workouts are particularly grueling, and afterwards I don't want to screw up my diet 1 iota after working so hard. Vegeta, what does the Scotter say about the power levels of these guys over at RP Plus?
And then he says it's 9,000.
I should hope. Dave. All right, Dave. So the good news is if you're generating a calorie deficit, your protein is on average high enough, which yours is, and you're training relatively hard, you are accomplishing the fundamentals of cutting well. It won't be a problem, and the details of how you get to that is much less of a concern. The downside is that I think you are encountering quite a bit of needless flux, and flux is not a good thing. So the ups and downs, basically, of carbs and water and calories, it tends to destabilize systems and not support their optimal function. My best recommendation to you is to keep the carbs in and make them much more fibrous carbs and much more fruit and vegetables. So if you have a shitload of veggies and a shitload of fruits, it's actually quite a bit of volume. You'll find them very satiating. Don't stick to breads and rices and cereals and stuff, because for sure in low quantities they're not. And I think you will find that everything goes much better. But if you insist on this method, it's not terrible. I would just be worried about long-term sustainability, disordered eating patterns, so on and so forth. James?
I have kind of a personal, and I admit it's not a great position stance. I just don't like the DUP kind of style program.
Yeah, I don't either.
I'm not a fan, and that's not, and I can't sit here and tell you that it's bad or wrong. I just don't like it. So if you were to say, hey, what do you think of this program? I'd be like, why don't you just do like normal hypertrophy training, which is great for cutting and just all around good for the situation. So that would be a critique I would make. I would also say, what you taking all that Yohimbe for? You trying to get a Gabi? What's going on? That's blowjob. That's also blowjob.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's okay, and I think the like you have day 3 and 4 are distinct cardio days. I would say if you're cutting, you can use cardio every day realistically, unless it really craps out your legs. So all I'm saying is it's fine to have cardio days like that, but also don't think that you're limited. Like if you don't want to starve yourself, you can just add 30 to 45 minutes of list cardio and take that boner pill any day that you want. And it makes it a little bit easier, so you don't have to starve yourself quite so much.
Yeah. I think
you get a big old boner.
The crazy amount of fatigue caused by the super low days is not going to be wiped away by a super high carb day. Whereas if you do more moderate throughout the week, maybe with some pulsatility, you accomplish a much lower average fatigue.
Yeah, so I think what Mike and I are both kind of suggesting to you is that this is okay, but it's probably a lot of peaks and valleys that are needless in terms of not only like body water, but like fatigue management and stuff. I think you could get the same effect from doing something much more stable. But if it's working for you, I think if it's working for you, that's great. And you don't necessarily have to change it.
And you can still keep peaks and valleys. I would just say that both should be a little less extreme.
Yeah.
All right. John Pelasex says he mentioned 1 or 2 webinars ago that the whole 2.5% load progression week to week is gone from the MPT. And then you blue balled me and didn't elaborate, bastards. Can you elaborate on the reasoning here? I'm mostly wondering if it's primarily just a change that serves the template specifically, or have your recommendations changed recently regarding week-to-week load increases? Thanks as always, guys. No, they haven't changed. So what we've found is that volume and volume increases are much more related to and causative of hypertrophy than intensity or intensity increases. So instead of jumping up by 2.5% per week, we're jumping up by 2%, and that means that we still get stronger over time, but we get bigger because we can have more fatigue room, MRV room to spare to jump up in volume. And also, the MPTs are now longer. Each mesocycle is longer. The accumulation phase is longer. So we need to jump by smaller progressions because, fuck, you just can't get that much stronger and maintain your reps if it's multiple, 5 to 7 weeks or 5 to 6 weeks versus 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Daniel Hacker says, Jordan Peters and Shelby Starnes noted. What about for aesthetics or athletics, strength and conditioning for sport? I know you both have mentioned Bo Sandoval in the past. Any other strength coaches you think are worth looking to? All the guys I know are not on the internet. Like Kyle Pierce is really good, but he's not online. He's fucking 100 years old.
I've also found that the strength conditioning. I don't want to do this because it's cliche in our field, but the state of strength conditioning is really not great as it currently stands, and there's just a lot of clickbait and selling of stupid crap. And I don't know how to say it without sounding cliche, but it's true. And so what you find is that a lot of the stuff that you can find online is mostly stupid, and it's mostly meant to be exotic, weird stuff. Even like, for example, a lot of people were criticizing the Iowa. I think the Iowa football strength conditioning coach, that he's got a big fucking hipster mustache. If you watch his training videos, they're ridiculous. He's talking about how football players should be using these like half dome Bosu balls and doing all these like ridiculous movement things. And it has nothing to do with strength conditioning. But because he has a hipster mustache and because he makes ridiculous videos that show these kind of, I don't want to say taboo, but like exotic, weirdo stuff, he gets a lot of attention. Does that mean it's worth your time? I would say no. So the thing is, so my point, I'm rambling, I'm sorry. My point is, I don't have a good suggestion because most of the stuff that I see is garbage, and that's the problem. And I think that's indicative of the poor state of the industry, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, another guy I think you probably know, but Alex Viada is really good, and he does some sport commentary every now and again. There's a lot about endurance and concurrent training, so it might not be up your alley, but he's good. And
let me just tell you this. If you want to, I'll put this out there. Really good fundamental strength conditioning is boring as fuck. There's not anything exciting about it unless you really like seeing people make gains, small gains over the course of years and years. And by small gains, I mean in the gym, on the field, on the pitch, whatever. It's boring. There's nothing fun and exciting. Like, what are the things that they do? Oh, they squat. They do hypertrophy and strength training. Every now and again, they do some power training, and they spend a lot of time doing their sport. That's strength and conditioning. It's not fun. It's not sexy. It's fundamental stuff done very, very well. That's it. And it doesn't sell. It's not a good selling point. So you will never find people who are very popular and have tons of followers doing what we would consider excellent strength conditioning programs.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Should we answer this by Julian Paras, who snuck in here really quick?
Oh, a double. Yeah, let's just go for it.
Right. I got a super go after this. All right. Hey, I'll cook one. I've noticed going from low bar to high bar squat, my knees are fucked for a few weeks while I'm doing the movement. I'm assuming the discomfort is due to either the extra ROM or having to find your groove in the movement. Thinking next time I'll keep the high bar at light weights to keep my techniques on it, lose it entirely. Good idea.
Yes.
Before, my high bars were perfect with no pain at all. I'm still learning, and I feel the more fuck-ups I commit, the more wisdom I gain. Just try not to kill myself in the process. You just described life.
So what you suggested was really good. And then if you, in lieu of doing that, where you have kind of a high bar in your back pocket on most mesocycles, if you're going a clean start on high bar, start with a lower intensity if it fucks your knees up that bad, and then take a bigger intensity jump on week 2.
Totally. And then Julian said, oh, and super quick, headaches, intro workout in the right temple area. Is this just hydration? Almost certainly not. I'm drinking 1 or so liters during the workout, which is usually 1 to 1.5 hours. I would see a doctor.
Headaches it's so variable. See a doctor. There's no way to comment on that. Sorry.
Oi, doctor. Nah, yeah.
Oy.
Yeah, nah.
Yeah, nah, it's my favorite. You're like, wait.
Yeah. Which one is it?
Which one is it? And then in New Zealand, they do it backwards. They go, nah, yeah.
Fucking New Zealanders.
Weirdos. All right, folks. Mike's got to go. I got to go as well. Thanks for tuning in. Mike, are we on for next week? Normal schedule?
Let me check. Yep.
Cool. So we thanks for the great questions as always, and we will see you next time.
Peace, homies.